Yes, my name is Sally Pont, Ms. Pont. I am a college counselor, an independent college counselor, and a teacher of writing. I've been in college counseling for about 3 decades. I began college counseling as an English teacher, and primarily what I was doing at that time was I was helping students improve the essays on their applications. And I did this without anyone knowing about it. And the college counselor at my school began to notice that the essays were improving and improving. And so she got to the bottom of it and discovered that I was helping the students. And so she wanted to get me paid. And in that way, I was lulled into the college counseling world. She began to show me the ropes. I began to visit dozens of colleges. I have now visited hundreds of colleges around the country. And I have worked every year with students, soup to nuts on the college application process, starting with sometimes 8th grade all the way to graduation, and sometimes even beyond, helping them transfer. And the one thing that I can tell you is this: the bottom line is that when your child is applying to college, what they will be evaluated on is a very small pile of paper. There will be papers with numbers on it, grades. There will be papers with other numbers on it, standardized test scores. There will be papers on it with recommendations from teachers. And then finally, there will be the essays. And it's those essays that are my area of expertise and which really allow students to tell their stories. Now, if people on this call are wondering, how can my child get into Stanford, Yale, Harvard, Princeton, Williams, or some other top-ranked school? It is through the telling of a fantastic story. So what I do over the course of high school, or as much time as I have with the child, is I help the students shape their story, and then I help the students tell their story. And those pieces of paper, those essays, resonate in the college admissions offices. All right, so Dan, I'd love to be able to get to my PowerPoint. So is it possible for me to share that screen? Yes, good. All right, great. All right, so let me talk in general about what I do. Now, one of the things that's absolutely true right now is that COVID-19 2020 dramatically impacted college counseling in a variety of ways. So I want to talk about college counseling in general right now, because many of our expectations and preconceived notions about what gets a child into college radically changed this year. So just so listen to me as I walk you through the college counseling process. And this is what I was afraid of. Okay. Dan, because of the Zoom, it's moving a little slowly. It's not switching slides.
Yeah, can you return on the PowerPoint?
Not enter?
Yeah, enter is return the same, yeah.
It's not moving. I know. This happens when Zoom is up sometimes. Okay.
You can talk and let me figure. Oh yeah, it's fine now.
Okay, and then suddenly it went. Okay, now I need to go back a little bit. All right. There. It unlocked. Okay, very good. All right. So let's talk first and foremost about what colleges are looking for, because this is the radical thing that changed in 2020. So as soon as things started locking down in the United States in March, April, May, colleges immediately got together and recognized that they were going to have to do something very different, because as a result of the various quarantines, students' access to standardized tests became limited or non-existent. And so every school around the country became either test optional, or in the case of the California system and a couple of other schools, they became test blind. As a result, what happened in the college admissions offices is that they developed a brand new metric for measuring students. You know, they need to be able to quantify all of this on some level. So the old metric that they would use to measure students based on standardized test scores, grades, activities, and all the other pieces, that was for the students with the standardized test scores. Those who chose not to submit, who took test optional, a new metric was formed. Now, as a result, that metric is in place, and it's been articulated, and it's being utilized right now to evaluate students. So it leads a very big question mark after standardized test scores. What do they really mean? Should students really focus on them? Should they send them? What should they send? Is a 30 ACT good enough? There's lots of questions to answer. But what I want to emphasize in this list, what colleges are looking for, they're looking for academics, standardized test scores, grades, degree of course difficulty. Now that is something that is hard and fast because of this slippage with the standardized tests. Students must take the hardest courses available to them in which they will succeed. That is certainly what colleges are looking for on the academic side. That has never been more important than in 2020, 2021. Now, extracurriculars, all the standards hold true. They certainly are looking for participation in athletics, the arts, service, but over time, over the past 5 years, and I'm sure you have all seen this with in your children's experience and their friends and their schools, research has become increasingly more pronounced. The AP added to their program an AP research class. Many high schools have affiliations with university settings and labs, and high school students have access to them. I have worked with many high school students who are first authors on published research articles. Guess what? That will get you into college. So extracurriculars in the research side of things are certainly on the rise. All right, so let me talk a little bit more about this test optional piece, because some of the things that happened in 2020 were fairly mind-blowing. All right, we have the ACT and the SAT. In the past, several schools also required SAT subject tests, most notably the technical schools, MIT, Caltech, Carnegie Mellon. They required an SAT subject test, one in math, one in a science. In 2020, MIT said, no more, we're not even going to take those scores. So suddenly, all these students who were preparing for the Math 2 subject test, preparing for the physics subject test, they didn't have that test score to submit. So what then is MIT looking at? Degree of course difficulty. What scores are worth submitting is going to be the big question. I do not have an answer to that question right now. I'm going to have to wait to see till all the results come in the spring. But I have had students who went through the first cycle of applications in the 2020-21 season. I'm going to give just one anecdotal example. A young man, terrific researcher, applied ED to Johns Hopkins, was not satisfied with his test scores, even though they were good. And he went test optional with Johns Hopkins, and he was admitted ED. So, you know, this test optional, should you submit, should you not submit? I'm going to accumulate all the data by the end of this year and see if I can establish some number. Okay, over this, submit. Under this, don't submit. We'll see. Let me talk a little bit about degree of course difficulty, because there's also the differential. Probably many of your children, either themselves or see their friends, self-teaching AP classes or Java or Python or something outside of the classroom, which is wonderful. But self-teaching needs to somehow be documented in order to impress the colleges. It's got to wind up on that small pile of paper. If it's not on the transcript, then I always want students to either take an AP test. So if they're self-teaching Java, take the computer science AP. If they're self-teaching microeconomics, take the AP, so that they have the documentation. If not, if they're self-teaching something else, perhaps it can appear in a letter of recommendation. All right. Let me just make a little note about standardized tests. I talked a little bit about the subject tests and how some schools are moving away from them. The other school that I would note about the SAT subject test, Georgetown University for years required 3. 2 years ago, they changed the language to strongly recommended. And then in 2020, they simply recommend 3 SAT scores. Do I think the students should take them? Do I think that's what Georgetown wants? I kind of do. So subject tests are not off the table entirely. They still are floating out there. They still are a representation of what the students are capable of in the classroom. There are a slightly more linear version of the AP test. Now, the question parents often ask me, should my child focus on the ACT or the SAT? Which is easier, which speaks to a different mindset? At the end of the day, they are both standardized tests. They measure math ability, they measure verbal ability. They have different styles. The ACT is a little bit more fast-paced, and it has something called a science section, which requires that the students be able to read graphs, to be able to interpret scientific data, and it requires a modicum, just a small amount of previous knowledge. The SAT, in contrast, is 2 verbal sections, 2 math sections. It's a little bit longer of a test. It's a little bit, it's not quite as fast-paced as the ACT. I find it to be, the reading sections especially, to be a little bit more sophisticated. I have a question, so I'm going to answer it. Okay, why do AP tests need to happen before junior year? That is a great question. All right, so AP tests, what are they for? In most schools, unless it's a school with an IB curriculum, and that's a whole different, AP tests are the most challenging course that a school offers. So if a student takes an AP class in sophomore year or junior year, that demonstrates that they are pushing their academic rigor as far as they can. And that is what colleges want to see. In addition, those AP scores from sophomore or especially junior year, which is when really I think the students are most intellectually prepared to take AP classes. Once they've completed those rigorous classes, great, they take the test, ideally get a 5, and those scores will go to colleges. That is wonderful documentation. So prior to 2020, I've always put, in terms of if I were to put a pecking order of testing, I would say that colleges first look at the ACT and the SAT paramount, first before any test. But then right under that, the AP test, because the AP test demonstrates the mastery of a subject matter. So that's why students take the AP test in junior year and don't wait till senior year. By senior year, the application process is done and the students are kind of done. So, I mean, many students will opt to not take the test if they're allowed. So junior year is the time to take it. Now, the TOEFL, IELTS, Duolingo tests are for international students. Now, students who are international students who are at school in the United States, if they've been at school in the United States for 4 years, those tests are required but not emphasized. They are certainly imperative for international students. And I will answer more questions about standardized tests in our Q&A section. Let's see if I can move forward. Okay, maybe not. It's sticking again. Here we go. Okay, let me talk a little bit about contributions to community, because I think that one of the things that that colleges are moving away from is conventional activities. being president of the class, being head of a club at a school, which doesn't really necessarily require a lot of time and is fairly tried and true activity, is not necessarily the contributions to community that really excite a college admissions office. What they are looking for is a kind of contribution to the school community or to the local community or to civic responsibility that requires real responsibility and real initiative on the part of the students. So, for example, I am working with a student right now who was very, very proactive in organizing his school community, in getting students to volunteer at polling sites. Now, typically, if you go to a polling site during an election, you'll see that the people who are manning the polling sites tend to be retirees. And in 2020, having a retiree sitting at a public space where people are coming and going was deemed unsafe. And so these young people, 18-year-olds, were volunteering to take the place of those retirees. So because they were young, they were healthy, and they manned all the polling sites in their particular city and really did a bang-up job. That is the kind of initiative, that is the kind of contribution to community that really impresses college admissions offices. All right, I want to talk a little bit about the colleges themselves. Now, I can talk to you very specifically about what gets students into Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Williams, et cetera. But I want to talk about something even more interesting. And that is that deep inside many of the top schools are niche programs, really interesting niche programs that speak to the passions and the talents of particular students, and that are just seem tailor-made for some kids. But it does take digging, and it does take knowing the student and the students knowing themselves to really be able to find them. So I just plucked some of my favorites, but these are just examples. There's dozens of them. So just as an example, within Wharton, the business school, which is both undergraduate and graduate level, the business school at the University of Pennsylvania, there are 4 dual degree programs that are absolutely fascinating and tailor-made to specific students. One's the Huntsman program in International Studies and Business, and that is an amazing program that weds business with international politics and has a language requirement. There's the Roy and Diana Vigelos program in Life Science and Management, which focuses on managing healthcare facilities. So it's business and medicine. The Jerome Fisher program, lovingly called M&T, is a technology and business program. And then there's the nursing and healthcare management program. They are very small programs. They are very, very elite. Columbia University and Sciences Po in France have a dual degree program where the students are allowed to do 2 years in France, 2 years at Columbia University in New York. Great. They become completely fluent in French. They learn all sorts of things about international politics while in France. They have access to the UN in Geneva, and then they come back to Columbia and complete their degree. It's an amazing match. The University of Southern California has the Jimmy Young and Andre Iovine Academy, which is for entrepreneurship and technology. Very specific program, very interdisciplinary. Okay, there's a few more programs. There's dozens more programs like that tucked at all different schools. And once I can zero in on a student's passion, I can steer them in this direction. All right. And then there's programs with very specific majors. And when you apply to the college, you apply to that major. And this is most often true with business programs, arts programs, music programs, and engineering programs. So this is just 3 examples. So the Ross School of Business, when you apply to the University of Michigan, if you know that's what you want to do, you apply there. And not to the other programs, not to arts and sciences at Michigan, not to engineering at Michigan, just to the Ross School of Business. The same with the Tisch School of the Arts. You will just apply to that program, not NYU, and that is a very rigorous application. The same with the Herb Alpert School of Music at the University of California, Los Angeles. Special application, special program. Now, the thing about these, again, these are 3 examples of the many specific majors that you apply to with a special application. It takes great presence of mind on the part of the student and the counselor and the parents to find these programs that are perfect for some kids, to find them ahead of time. Because I'll tell you, anyone applying to the Ida Vine and Young program at Southern California, or the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan, or Tisch at New York University, those kids have full portfolios. Those kids have tons of experience. If they're applying to Ross, they've done internships. If they're applying to the Management and Technology program at the Wharton School, I'll tell you, they can do programming in every language. So those kids have primed themselves. You can't just apply to these programs on a whim and expect to get in. It takes a couple good, solid years of preparation, of summer programs, of smart class taking, and good advice to get into these programs. But they are all fantastic. All right, I want to do a little bit of a comparison contrast of 2 different schools. As you know, there's a range of schools around the country. There are 3,600 plus accredited universities in the United States. They essentially fall into a few different categories. We have the larger research institutions like Johns Hopkins, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. We have the small liberal arts schools, which are undergraduate focused and designed to prepare students for the next level of education. We have a variety of faith-based schools, and some of the finest schools in the country, Notre Dame, Georgetown, are faith-based schools. And then, of course, there's the service academies, which I am not going to talk about this evening because that would require a separate session. So I just want to talk about Johns Hopkins, which, interestingly enough, for undergraduates is really a medium to smallish size school, an 11.5% acceptance rate, pretty good. Look at the average ACT, 33 to 35. You know, I think it's going to shift a little bit higher in this year because of the test optional. And the average SAT reading and writing, 710 to 760, math 740 to 800. This is a highly competitive college. 11.5 acceptance rate. But here's the thing about a school like Johns Hopkins. Everyone applying to a school like Johns Hopkins is of the same ilk. They are all interested in science. Johns Hopkins has the finest biomedical program in the country. So these are students that are focused on those sorts of things. So really in that applicant pool, there are candidates that are very, very similar. So that 11.5 acceptance rate, that means those are the best math and science kids, and particularly the best kids in engineering and biology related fields. Okay, let's compare that, interestingly enough, to a school that's sort of in some of your folks next to the neck of the woods, Pomona College, which is a small liberal arts school that's part of the Claremont system, just east of LA. And it is a small school, but at part of the Claremont system. It is at about 1,500 undergraduates. It is a very, very undergraduate friendly program that focuses on the humanities. It has a 7.6 acceptance rate. It is a very elite school. Their average ACT, little bit, the requirements seem to be a little bit lower than Johns Hopkins, 31 to 34. Their reading and writing a little bit lower than Johns Hopkins, 700 to 760. Why? Well, here's the deal. A school like Pomona College, which is outstanding, the placement rate for law school, medical school, every kind of graduate school is just through the roof. They are going to be reading a little bit more holistically than a school like Johns Hopkins. So that means that the essays are going to be a little bit more resonant. The letters of recommendation are going to be a little bit more resonant. That is going to be, and that's always the question with a school. Are they really looking at an application holistically, or are they looking more towards the numbers? I assure you, the Pomona colleges of the world are truly holistic. All right, so let's talk about what the students actually submit and what they can control. All right, so the application itself, which the students start in the summer before their senior year, is a variety of essays. Now, most students will use the common application and or the coalition application. Some schools will require the coalition application, which is similar, but not the same as the common application. So chances are your children will submit 3 different applications: the common app, the coalition application, and the UC application. So there's a lot of work that goes into this. And then each application will require its own set of essays. By the end of the process, your children will write about 10 plus essays. Now, as we move through and as the students work with me, they start to learn, after they've written their first few essays about their different activities, they learn how to take, if they write an essay about a community service opportunity that they participated in. If they write about it once for one school, perhaps they can use it again for another school. And we learn how to mix and match like that, tweak it to the various prompts. But those essays are very time consuming and of course, all essential because they are the student's story. In addition, the common application and the coalition application, as well as the California application, contain an activities list. Now, this is the UC application is very generous with its activities list. The students can list so many things, up to 20 items. The common application and the coalition application ask the students to compress it to 10. So 10 activities get listed in a very, very finite form. So that requires very intelligent choice and very intelligent phrasing. And then of course, there's the letters of recommendation. Now the UC schools don't accept them, but Yale, Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, etc., will be looking at those very aggressively. So let's look at the Princeton application just for fun. Now, the Princeton will take the common application. So every student will write a 650-word essay about something they're very passionate about. That will be one essay that goes to every school. So Princeton will get that essay. In addition, Princeton has several other essays. As you can see, the first essay, in 150 words, the students have to briefly elaborate on an activity. And then students have to write 250 words about a time they engaged in respectful dialogue about difficult issues. That's a hard essay. Then the students have to write about service and civic engagement and how their story connects with those ideals. So hopefully your children have participated in service and community engagement so that they can write this 250-word essay. In addition, the students have to write a 250-word essay essentially about what they want to study at Princeton and what excites them about studying at Princeton. This is a lot of writing. And then there's 50 little fun essays. What skill the students want to learn in college, what brings them joy, what does Princeton want for that? And what song represents the soundtrack of their life at that moment. That makes students tear their hair out. So that's just the Princeton application. That is an application that takes hours and hours and hours to complete, and lots of brainstorming and lots of editing. All right, the letters of recommendation I cannot stress the importance of these as well, particularly in this era of test optional. Now, all of your children, the counselor at their school will write a letter that is typically required in the common application. It accompanies the initial transcript. It will accompany the mid-year report. So the counselor will write something. Typically, counselors at your school will have your children write some sort of brag sheet so that the counselor has something to remark on. And here's the thing, it's imperative that your children fill out that brag sheet, because what the counselor says needs to reflect what's in the application. The teachers will write letters of recommendation, and typically schools will ask for 2 academic teachers, not necessarily dictating the discipline. It's so important that the teachers be able to write one very clear message that your child loves to learn. So if anything, you encourage your children to participate in class, encourage them to make an impression on their teacher so that teacher can write something down the road. And then, of course, there's almost always an allowance for an other recommender, and this can make all the difference in the world. So if your child, for example, is doing research under a researcher at a local university, great, get a letter of recommendation. If your child has volunteered with a political campaign, get their immediate superior to write a letter of recommendation. It is wonderful for the admissions offices to be able to see that your child has a vivid life outside of school, and they've taken advantages of all the educational opportunities out there. So that other recommender letter can make all the difference. All right, now shaping a college list. Now this is always an interesting challenge. Now, typically, every counselor has a formula for each child, and that is to have some reach schools, some target schools, some safety schools, and this will vary from student to student. My feeling always is, if a student has 1 or 2 schools on the safety list that they would love to go to, that we're confident that they'll get into, the student can have as many reaches as they want, and that the focus can be in that direction. I will say this, for the brightest students, for the most capable students, the students who achieve at the highest levels, the competition is the hardest. So you can have a student who seems perfect and will apply to Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Brown, Columbia, Penn, Duke, Northwestern, et cetera, et cetera. And there is no guarantee that that student will get into any or all of those schools, because they are all competing against each other, and those students are so good. So I always want students who are applying to those top schools to cast their net wide, because they might get into Princeton and nothing else. They might get into Yale and Stanford and nothing else, or something in between. It is very tricky. And I can anecdotally, when I talk a little bit, in fact, why don't I use this moment to sort of wax poetical about that? I did work with a student a couple years ago who is currently a student at Stanford University. And he was admitted to Stanford and to Harvard and to MIT, but not to Princeton, not to Duke, not to the University of Chicago, not to the University of Michigan. You wonder whether Michigan does their yield management, but I can't imagine that Columbia has to do such things. So it was interesting how he did not get into Cornell either. It was interesting how that all went down. Now that he got into Stanford, Harvard, and not Princeton, we're all scratching our heads over that. But that's how peculiar it can go down for the students who are applying to the most competitive colleges and who have the credentials to apply to those schools and get accepted to those schools. Now that I'm on that little anecdote, do let me talk a little bit about that student and about one other student. In the past 2 years, I was fortunate enough to work with students who were admitted to Stanford University and some other wonderful schools, and they both matriculated to Stanford. And they were 2 wonderful kids, very bright. Were they perfect? No. They all had their flaws, and each could not have been more surprised when they were admitted to Stanford. And which they were very humbled by it, and it was quite lovely. But I will say this: what both of them possessed was a keen ability to tell their stories in a way that was so engaging. Sometimes they
过
were
来听一
funny.
下吧，因为很多小孩已经在 middle school 已经在 plan 了。
Oh, thank you. Talking about the two students who got into Stanford, what they had in common was a self-awareness and ability to tell their story in which they were sometimes funny, sometimes very poignant, sometimes able to tell their story in a way that almost moved you to tears. And it was that quality, I firmly believe, more than anything else, more than their ACT scores, it was the quality to tell their story that got them into Stanford. All right, just as a final note, every school will have certain expectations if you're looking for financial aid. The FAFSA, the CSS profile is required by many schools. Merit scholarships are typically meted out by the universities themselves, and those are most often based on standardized test scores still. So that is something to keep in mind down the road when you're contemplating the test optional idea. But that is the end of my formal presentation, and so I would be delighted to open up the floor to questions. Dan, would you like me to stop share? Dan? Oh dear, Dan? Okay. Dan, should we invite some questions now?
Yes. So thank you, Ms. Pont, for your lovely sharing. And we'll open the floor to all the questions one by one. Yeah. Go ahead. English, please. Or if you prefer speak Chinese, I will translate, okay?
Hi, Dan. Hi, this is Christine. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
I have a question. Because there's no SAT anymore, so the school AP class become very important. But different schools offer different amount of AP. The private school that we are taking at Bishop, they really don't offer as many AP class as CCA or Torrey Pine. Will that put an disadvantage to the kids who take private school that does not offer a lot of AP?
That is an excellent question, and thank you. And that will allow me to dovetail and talk a little bit more about UC schools. But do know that with every school across the country offers varying amounts of APs or IBs, or not at all. I mean, some schools don't offer any of that and have their own system. What every school sends to the colleges is a school profile, and the school profile chronicles where the students from that school have matriculated, what the standardized test score range is, and the APs offered. And it's a one-page document, and any college admissions office looking at that document will be able to glance down it and know how rigorous their program is. So if your school only offers 10 APs, or even less, I mean, some schools offer less, and your child takes 8, they've come close to maxing out. Some schools will offer 20, and some students will max out, but those students are not compared to each other. They are measured within the context of what their school can offer. So this is the refrain. The student must take the most challenging course load available to them. So if Bishop has a course load that's different from the other school, the student is measured in terms of Bishop's offerings. Okay?
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I understand now.
Okay, thank you, Christine.
Good question.
Yeah, very good question. Yeah. Anyone else? Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. So, Ms. Pont, great presentation. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, as someone who's new to this, do you recommend a resource or website where we can start, to do like planning and thinking about all the whole thing that we have to go through in order to get into the college?
Well, I mean, I recommend me is to be honest. I mean, what I do, and I have worked with students starting in 9th grade all the way through the process, sometimes starting in 10th. The later it gets, the fewer decisions you can make. And so one of the things that I am able to do is assess your child's passions and interests, and therefore push them in directions that will allow them to excel, that will allow them to get to get out into the community and to do those things that will provide for exciting stories. I will also advise on academics, so that the student is taking a course load that is both challenging and that makes sense for them. I will also find summer programs for them. And so the resource is Ms. Pont.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, one thing I want to highlight is this kind of service is not really like you can go search all the informations on Google or Baidu, but it's really get to know your student, right? So I want to take my personal experience here. I do college counseling, very, very, very limited. I help 1 student or 2 students at most a year, right? My son is applying, right? I have a younger one, a senior. He doesn't listen to me. You think he's going to listen to the parents, right? No, the last minute that I really ran out of, I can't answer his question. He doesn't take anything advice I give to him. His friend that is using Miss Pont and recommended him to use Miss Pont in November, just a couple months ago. And it's hard to coach your own student because they are not willing to open up to you. You need a professional adult that your students are willing to open up, and the professional counselor get to know your student and then really can help them planning. Parents is a different role. It's taking them out for lunch and have fun. That's how I see it. So
well, and to dovetail on that, I work with Dan's son Liam, and Liam listens to everything I say. Everything I tell him to do, he does, and it is a dream. So I think that he's going to get some nice responses come spring.
Yeah. And Ms. Pont also helped my older one. He's at Berkeley studying computer science, but also was a very, very, very last minute because he went with his friends using a local company here, but the local counselor wasn't helping him enough, especially with writing portion of it. So last minute, my older one came to me, said, "Oh, mommy, I need help." I'm not a native speaker, of course. So I like, okay, here you go, Miss Pont, go help him out. And that was in December. So that's my own story. And I highly recommend Miss Pont because I give my children to Miss Pont. So that's why I'm speaking from my heart. Yeah, here.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Any other questions?
I have a question. How many students does Miss Pont take each year?
Well, on average, I work with about 25 seniors, but I have a range of students. I actually have a probably currently at this juncture about 15 juniors that I'm working with, maybe 8 to 10 10th graders, and then a handful of 9th graders have just recently signed on. And to be honest, that's how I prefer it, because then I can help formulate their academic program as well as their extracurricular program. I mean, the beauty of when Dan's children came to me, they had already done such interesting things that it was not a challenge to have to frame really exciting essays. They had so much to write about. But to ensure that, I like to start with the students as early as possible so that we can create this wonderful narrative arc that makes such perfect sense and creates this wonderful coherent narrative to submit to the colleges.
Thank you. Do you work alone or you have assistant?
I'm pretty much I pretty much do everything soup to nuts. I also prepare students. I'm well versed in preparing students for the verbal portion of the ACT and the SAT. I've also taught AP English, both English language and English composition. So I can pitch hit in that respect. The one person I do work with is a math tutor who sometimes works with my students who require math support for the SAT and the ACT or the SAT subject test. There's a couple questions in chat that I'm going to field. Let's see. What kinds of things are extracurricular activities that really stand out to colleges in the application process? Excellent question. Anything, the simplest answer is anything that demonstrates student initiative and follow through. Okay, so sort of leaving a footprint. So just as an example, I work with a student who is very involved in her local community with she wants to be a doctor, and she volunteers with a free health clinic, and they have developed a mobile health clinic to serve the homeless population in that city. And she has created their database all by herself. So she found out she's gotten all the information from hundreds of homeless people, and they are now all in a database so that when they show up to the bus, the doctor pulls up the information. There's the medical history. She's going to get into college. So anything that demonstrates initiative and speaks to the student's passion. Good question. More questions?
Yeah, any other questions?
Thanks, Dana and Ms. Pong, for excellent presentation. I have a question about, you mentioned the students should prepare for their essay in the summer before senior. So is that a focus for that, or for that summer people should do the some kind of summer school or internship or whatever? So what's your recommendation? Or maybe they still need to prep for their the standardized test. So what's that summer your recommendation to do?
It's a great question. You're right. Oftentimes the students are involved in some activity that summer before senior year that should be the essay. If they are, in Guatemala, building houses with Habitat for Humanity in the summer before senior year, then we'll just hold off on writing that essay. However, there's plenty of essays to write. Now, I often have students tackle the UC essays first, because if any of your children, if any of you have older children who've applied, those UC essays, there's 4 essays, but they have 8 different prompts, and they're 350 words long each. And they are, if the students write those essays first, they can draw from those and use those as in other essays. Or we might see which one is the most sparkling that we can use to be the personal statement in the Common Application. So that way we can sort of hold off on and see how any summer activity might play out, because you're right. Sometimes the students do things at the very last moment that are just spectacular. Yeah, I had a student.
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow up for the UC, most students would apply UC because you write one essay, apply so many schools. But I just heard they changed the policy. You can only apply one school, is counted as one school. Is that correct? For UC, for instance, before you apply for UC, you can choose UCLA, UCSD, UC Berkeley, UC Santa Barbara, whatever. But now they say you can only apply one school, is counted as one. Is there a change like that?
Now for this cycle, the students were able to select all or some of the campuses on the application. And I don't think that they're going to deviate from that policy. So it's one application for the whole UC system.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Separate application fee, if that's what you mean.
Oh, yes, there's a separate application fee. Yeah, they'll take your money.
Yes, they will take.
But the same as. Okay.
Yes,
Okay. All right.
Yes,
that's great.
Yes, you'll be getting out the credit card quite a number of times as this process goes on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So great. Okay, Miss Pont, there's another question in the chat about boys. Many students.
Many students, especially boys, are not sure what they want to do in the future. How do you help students discover and develop their passion interests? It's a great question. I mean, the reality is that with most large comprehensive universities, if you're applying to their arts and sciences program, you do not have to commit to a major. You can suggest one, but the reality is that if you're in an arts and science program, you'll be able to switch majors. Now, the trick of that is it's often difficult to then jump into an engineering program or a business program. But you know, if they're a little bit behind, then perhaps they want to go get their master's. So, but that being said, if I'm working with students early enough, then what I will always do is if I can get a sense of what they're good at in school, you know, if their strengths are in writing, or if their strengths are in statistics, or if their strengths are in computers, then I will recommend summer programs or internships or something that will answer the question, is this what you're passionate about? Yes or no? And oftentimes a really good summer program or a really well-chosen internship can make all the difference in saying, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. So there are wonderful summer programs out there for every single discipline.
Okay, that's great. Yeah.
May I follow up with this? For summer program, you know, summer school versus internship, which one is better, especially right now with this, you know, co-ed condition, or the summer program will become online. So, but you know, now we are in China, there's still opportunity perhaps for internship. So what's your recommendation in general and right now this year in specific? Thank you.
Always choose whatever is going to provide the most hands-on experience. Okay, so if a summer program is going to be online, I would never choose that over an internship. Now, but I will also say, I mean, I would be insistent that the internship that the student be allowed to be given as much responsibility as possible. That's understood, and that your child is willing to go in and take risks and do hard things and figure out how it all works. That's the measurement of a good internship. And that's the measurement of a good summer program, if there's a true hands-on experience. So if COVID continues and summer programs this summer are remote, then, you know, I've seen some good experiences. I had some students have decent experiences this past summer, but only decent. And it was a last resort kind of situation. But the students who were able to sort of weasel their way into science labs or have any other practical hands-on experience, that's light years better. So that's always the measurement, hands-on experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, I just want to add quickly about internship that I mentioned at the beginning that, right? So I'm the co-founder of both companies, Nextstream and Haddee. We have a lot of interns working with us, and we give them very challenging projects. As you can see, the Haddee.com was built by our team of interns. So I'm very proud to share this story with all of you guys. Yeah. Okay. So Sally, I think more questions coming about community college.
Okay, excellent. Okay, it's going to community colleges for a year or two, then transferring into other better colleges. Good idea. It's certainly, okay, so that's a great question. so many schools, particularly state schools, so UNC, UVA, University of Texas, and actually, interestingly enough, Vanderbilt, they reserve a certain number of spots for that exact style of kid. Now, the student will have to get straight A's, no doubt. I mean, they have perfect academic record and rigorous classes. Transferring requires that you take rigorous classes. So, but yes, it can be a good idea. And as I said, but those are the types of schools that will be very open to that style of student. You know, transferring is something that with some schools was complete anathema, never happened a few years ago, but it's becoming increasingly more lucrative for the colleges to do that.
Yeah, one thing I want to add about transferring, I think right now it's a special situation, but if the kids are willing to go back to college, transfer, it's a little bit hard because they build their friendship and the network as a freshman. So if you coming in as a junior and everybody else has already taken 2 years here, I met students, I met parents, and they told me it's very difficult to kind of mingle in as a junior. So you really miss out like 2 years of good bonding with freshmen. That's where your students become adults by making friends. Okay, that's a traditional setting, the campus life. Right now, I think it's very difficult to say because nobody's going back to, you know, campus. So that's just my personal observation.
Yeah. But I will say, I have a student right now who already came to me that I worked with previously, who has asked me to help him transfer, and I'm curious to see how the number, because of the situation of COVID, is going to impact transferring. My guess is that there will be more empty beds, and that this will be a good year to transfer. But we shall see. We shall see. I think there's so many question marks about this particular year. I have a question about good internships and volunteer experience for kids who are young, like summer before 9th grade. Okay, a little bit trickier. I mean, oftentimes there's opportunities at local zoos or at the local parks. I know that I suspect that probably the San Diego Zoo has a fantastic zoo team kind of program. I've seen those before. Those are the sorts of activities that are tailor-made for younger kids, working at the parks, working with animals.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, if your children, just to add to that, if your children play music, right? Again, it's hard right now because my son, younger one, played music, and he often goes to play at the church, plays for senior citizen house, play for homeless people. So plays at Balboa Park, and I think that's part of it. And he started very, very young, at a very young age. That's a very good community service. So just,
yes.
Yeah.
That's a nice, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, more question, Ms. Pont.
Okay, another question.
With respect to major. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, what would the WRTC?
Yeah, with respect to.
Oh, with respect to, thank you. With respect to major, though universities allow major non-declared, is there any restrictions on which major they can select after the first or second year? Most UC schools have impacted major, yes. How about other top tier universities such as Ivy's, Johns Hopkins, Duke, et cetera, or similar tier universities? To be honest, the top tier schools will be the ones that are the most flexible. They will, when you're applying to Yale, Harvard, Princeton, Duke, there's some programs at Northwestern. Those schools, you are not applying to a particular program. Now, so it is wide open for you to find your way into every single major if you are admitted to Yale, Harvard, Princeton, Stanford. Cornell, Columbia, that is not true. Columbia, you will be, if you wanted to go into engineering, you would apply to their engineering school. Cornell is very rigid in its separation of programs. So they're all a little bit different, but some of them wide open. So if you're undecided, you know, Duke is certainly a good choice. Brown is another wide open. They're open and known for it. They pride themselves on their open curriculum. So they will not pigeonhole you in the way that many schools will.
Yeah. So I do interviews for Cornell since I'm an alumni for alumni interview. Yeah, Cornell transferring between different colleges is very challenging. The reason is 3 colleges are public funded. So if you're in New York, you can go to 3 colleges and pay for the state tuition. And the other 4 are private funded. And so they don't really allow the transfer. It's very difficult.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I think more questions. Yeah.
Okay, and then we're delving into the UC. Okay, with UC's cap GPA calculation, only 8 extra points are allowed to use. For 10th grade, the students only allowed to use 4 extra points. Okay. Okay, if the students take more than 2 AP classes in 10th grade, so the third one won't be counted. What's the best way for the students to choose the AP classes? Well, they choose the AP classes. Okay, so here's the secret. I mean, there's behind closed doors, certainly some AP classes are regarded as more rigorous than others. AP chemistry is more rigorous than AP psychology. Everybody knows that. So, pardon?
Go ahead. No. Yeah.
Was that?
Go ahead.
No. So that is what I would say is that if you need to pick and choose, always choose the classes that the student will succeed in, but choose the classes that are as rigorous as possible and also within that realm where the student will succeed. So chemistry, physics, calculus, they are regarded as the most rigorous. In terms of, AP statistics is not as rigorous as AP calculus. So that is not, that's not necessarily, statistics would not be my first choice. From among the histories, AP US history is such a rigorous course. AP actually all the sciences are equally rigorous. AP Lang, and I speak from an English teacher's perspective, AP Lang is more rigorous than AP Lit. I assure you. So, and that is typically done in the junior year. Great. That's when you want to get these scores in and get good scores. Some of the social science courses like AP Human Geography, a little bit less rigorous. Sometimes students even take those in 9th grade. So that's how you would choose. You would choose to try to get the most rigorous courses as possible, and forego the ones that are a little bit softer.
Any other questions?
So if the student is currently in an
Go
Hi,
ahead.
Ms. Pong. Thanks. Hi, Ms. Pong. Can you comment on the addition of the adversity score in 2019, whether that has affected college, admission?
My sense is that got such pushback that it's not being practiced in a real aggressive way. So I think that is very much on a back burner. That's people don't talk about that too much anymore. The adversity score, that was more speculative, and it's not in the foreground of the admissions process.
Yeah.
In fact,
yeah, go ahead.
I think people are ignoring it.
Yeah.
Essentially, yeah, they're ignoring it.
So just we talk about diversity, right, Ms. Pont? I just gonna add something really quickly. I think I shared with all the 200 CCA parents before. We feel that's probably it's hard for Asian boys because a lot of us really applying for computer science. So yeah, we are really, really good, but there are other kids that are better than your student. So, but sometimes you see a girl or, you know, a minority and they get in. So you feel like, oh my gosh, that my son should have got in. I had the same feeling as well, right? When my son was applying. So, but in reality that he was all applying for CS and the CS admission rate was very, very low. And I talked to USC CS and they said it's only 4% that year. So I just want to kind of clarify the myths of the challenges for Asian boys going to STEM. It's just all of us are applying for the same major at very similar schools. So yeah, it's competition.
Yeah, it's I'll you know, anecdotally back to my one of my students that was admitted to Stanford. It was 2 years ago, and he's Asian and a math student who does quite a bit with machine learning, and he applied early action to MIT, early action to Caltech, and early action to the University of Michigan, and was deferred from all three. And he was convinced he wasn't going to get in anywhere. And he was convinced it was because he was Asian. He was an Asian math student who did very little else but play pickup basketball with his friends. And he was pretty good, but you know, he wasn't Jeremy Lin. And but he went on to get accepted to Stanford and Harvard and Carnegie Mellon and a variety of other wonderful schools, and now he's at Stanford. So there are happy endings for every tricky story.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. Okay. So
I have one more question down here. If the student is currently in an extracurricular sport, we should encourage them to keep on doing over their high school years. Correct. Yes, absolutely. Commitment to an activity is essential. Most of our children are not going to go on to play college sports. We know that. You know, they might feel that they're going to, but you know, we kind of know. But nevertheless, that playing sports it does all those intangible things that classroom activities simply cannot do. In addition, it is a kind of contribution to community. That's just wonderful and uplifting. So yes, a child should stick with a sport for 4 years, no doubt. Next question: if you have a choice from choose AP, get B, or choose college, prepare to get an A, which would be better choice? Thanks. Great. That is a question that would have to be a case by case basis. The AP course B, regular course A, it would depend on the AP class, and it would depend on what the child wanted to do. It would depend on the timing of it. Now, typically, I want my juniors to get straight A's. I do want that. However, if the child wants to go into a particular field, if this is a child who says that they want to go into engineering, and you know they're taking AP physics, get it. You know, they should be taking AP physics, and they should be getting an A. So that would be my question. However, if the child doesn't want to go into engineering, maybe not AP physics, but yes, we want A's, we want challenging classes. So it would be case by case, but in the end, if I had a crystal ball, I would choose straight A's over almost anything. All right, next question. You mentioned NYU School of Dance minutes ago. Just wondering whether they allow students in that dance program do a second major in another non-art related major. Not typically. Tisch at NYU it's a little fiefdom. It has a wall around it, and it is very rigorous and very difficult to get into, and it's a school unto itself. So, so no, those students will not be experiencing too much of the academic life external to Tisch. Did the particular student do anything after he was deferred to get into the other top schools? That's a great question. Okay, so because as you know, so many students get deferred early. Yes, that young man, after he was deferred by those top schools, he had the fire in his belly and he wrote spectacular applications and wrote letters of continued interest. And that is the final, the heartfelt piece of writing that the student can submit to the college. In addition, now this young man, I worked with him for about a year, and I don't always write for my students, but I did write him an additional supplemental letter of recommendation. And then I will often make follow-up phone calls to schools. And I did so. I'll tell you that story. I often make follow-up phone calls with schools. Hello, my name is Sally Pont. I'm calling on behalf of the student. You should have received my letter of recommendation. And I had called MIT for this young man, and I got sent to the voicemail of the admissions person, and I thought, I'm never going to hear from them. Well, the next thing I knew, my phone blew up and it said Cambridge, Massachusetts. Grabbed my phone, pulled up his file, and I chatted with MIT about this young man for about half an hour. And when I hung up the phone on that February morning, I knew he was going to get in. And I sat with that secret until March 13th when he got his admissions letter. And it was so exciting, but I already knew. So that's what you do. You push, you write the letter, maybe get another letter of recommendation, and then little phone call follow-up.
I have a question regarding college admission. How do those college admission officers view the help that the students get from private college counselors?
I think that they accept it as a norm, that it is just something that happens, that most typical high schools, the counselors are so overwhelmed or not particularly well trained that they can't provide the support that the students might need. And so independent counselors are regarded as just people who play a role in the lives of kids. For example, when I made that phone call for that young man, I knew him and I didn't misrepresent him or stretch the truth in any way. I just presented him straight on. And I think that is that's sometimes admissions offices are hungry for that. They want to know the kids better. They've gotten flimsy little letters of recommendation from the school counselor, so they want that inside story. They want the full pack. They want the child to be able to present an application that represents their full skill set. And so in my experience, college admissions offices think it is a-okay to have a counselor as long as that counselor is honest and straightforward and is just trying to promote the kids' honest talents and passions.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Pont, another question?
Okay. That's a good specific question. If AP Calculus BC is likely to get B, shall we take it? In terms of BC versus AB? Yeah. I mean, I would just, if the child is not planning on going into engineering, I would take Calc AB and get an A. Oh, AB's taken already. Well, the first question, is it a different teacher?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's frustrating because obviously something is wrong. I mean, if Calc AB was already taken and Calc BC is getting a B, is there any way to drop the class?
Yeah, probably too late right now.
Probably too late.
Yeah.
I'd get a tutor quick.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm with Ms. Pont. Is 11th grade is very, very important.
The A's.
I think my older son did really well with the application. One of the reasons is also that he progressed his grade. It was 9th grade B. You saw that, right? The 10th grade. And then 11th, he did just all A's. I always work with my students the same way with 11th grade. It's very important. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So
Yeah. I have a related question. If a student, is very just only focus on or interested or good, better at, for example, a STEM, maybe STEM approaching around a minus, but some of the liberal arts class, like, history can even get a C in 9th grade. So what's your advice for that? You keep mentioning, I've tried my best, but, I just don't have have that thing for history, for memorizing or things like that.
Well, so if the students if the student receives C's in the 9th grade, then but is doing extremely well in STEM, ideally what you should do is carefully choose classes that will allow for some progress. Obviously, that student's not going to advance to the AP level in the humanities, in English or history, but if you carefully choose classes, it would be nice to see a C to B to A progression. And that can be done if you find the right classes and the right teachers. But you don't have to take the hardest classes. Just try to increase incrementally C to B to A over time, and take normal level classes, no AP, don't worry about it. Just try to get that A.
All right, thank you.
We have a few more minutes, so a couple more questions. I think one is still about the dance, quality dance program. Ms. Pont, do you know?
Is there any quality dance programs in universities that allow students to do a second major? I don't know that off the top of my head, but I would suspect the University of Michigan might, and they have a stellar dance program.
Yeah, very good theater program as well.
Yes, but I think that they'll let you do a second major.
Okay.
Okay, and pros and cons for a student to respond to college sports recruitment, particularly
Torrey Pines.
Oh, Torrey Pines volleyball. Okay. How tall is it? How tall? I'm sorry. It's the question.
I think pros.
So here's the thing. I mean, if this is a female applicant. 5'9". Okay. Yeah. Male. Okay. So if you have this is my philosophy. If you have a card, play the card. So if the student is a really fantastic volleyball player, and is getting some nibbles from colleges, then follow through on it and see if it will work. But also I think that it's imperative that you ask your son's coach, what is the most realistic? Where can your son really play? Okay, lots of questions coming up. Ms. Pont, what does the minimum student profile look like that you wish to have? Oh, I don't differentiate. I mean, every student has their story. And there is a college for everybody. So everyone poses their own unique challenges and their own unique delights. So there's no such thing as a minimum. Everyone's equally interesting to me, and I will support them in every way I can. And I can be very creative.
Yeah. So I want to emphasize some boutique shops and the counseling service, they choose students. They give the Ivy League students more students more attention. I told you in the group that you guys signed in the WeChat group, we treat the students the same. Everybody is equal. I just really want to emphasize that. So please don't think, oh, your students are not as good, we're not going to get attention. Whatever the service, for that type of service, equal attention, okay?
It's the truth.
Very important. And the other thing is Ms. Pont, herself and myself as well, both, we love encourage our students. Ms. Pont really boosted my younger son's self-confidence. The self-confidence for teenager development, for student development is so important, okay? That's the added value that when you work with Ms. Pont or your student work with Ms. Pont, the confidence that will have a boost. So anyway, no problem. Go ahead.
There's another question in the comments. If no competition taken or awards still possible for top schools? Of course. So as you know, I was at a breakfast that was sponsored by, I think it was Harvard, Yale, Duke, Penn, and the admissions director from Harvard got up and he said he found it so refreshing when there were really very limited number of items on the activities list and that the students were not just always competition. So that is, you know, sometimes students do things where there's no competition, there's no measurement. The young woman I described for you, for example, who was putting together that medical database for homeless people, there's no way to quantify that, to put that on an honors list. There's no gold medal hanging around her neck. Nevertheless, what she just did is worthy of a gold medal in admissions office eyes. So don't worry about competitions. Absolutely possible for top schools. If in school orchestra, however, just a participant, no leadership or no outside awards, should she still continue? Absolutely. Again, that is part of a community. You know, the second violinists are as important as the first violinists. So please stay with an activity throughout high school. Would it be better to have a specialized area or in extracurriculars, or would it be better to be more spread out? That will depend on the student. I mean, it's very difficult for me to assess. Some students have a skill set that will take them all the way, and that's it. And some students really are Renaissance people, and that works too. So I don't think that there is one cookie cutter type that's going to get you into those top schools. Yeah. They don't want it either. They can't have it. They can't have a specialist in each category. That wouldn't make an interesting community. And that's what they want.
So definitely. Yeah. So I kind of like a summarize looking this whole thing is one is about interesting experiences, right? So Ms. Pont can work with your student or really develop interesting experience, but some students came in really, really late. We have students just came in senior December 15th, and Ms. Pont helped her as well. So last 2 weeks, right? So, but I look at, I always say interesting experience is very important. Of course, the academics kind of build everything together. The other ones, your students need to really know how to express yourself and how to write them. So the essays are the soul, the face of your application, because they don't meet you in person, right? You can send a video, but they really read what you write, right? On top of the numbers. The number's a number, but it's what you write is really you. So I can't emphasize how important the writing skills for college application later on for your career development. That writing skills and speaking skills are extremely important. So here's also we promote in the Haddee as well to help our teachers. We have the best writing teachers, debate teachers, college counseling teachers. So I'm very, very proud. Anyway, so we just 3 minutes, over. It's pretty late. So I'll take one more question. Okay, I think there's one more question here, right? Yeah.
Yeah, if a very competitive school can only manage average, will the college take into account the school quality? If I understand what you're saying is that if your student is coming from a school that is super competitive, absolutely.
Yes.
You know, that the context is everything.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you guys know the number of CCA students, how many of them every year get into Berkeley, right? So between 70 to 100, each year varies, right? Because of the CCA, yeah. So
Yes.
definitely, yeah. So
Right.
Torrey Pines too, right? Westview, all great schools that I know about. Okay,
You know,
so
every admissions office, granted, the schools will send their school profile, but admissions offices are trained to know the schools and to know their quality of education. They know. And they judge accordingly.
okay, so we'll wrap up here. So basically how to follow up, you guys have the WeChat group that you joined to get the Zoom ID. You can add me or add Haddee J, which is customer service in China, and we'll book a free consultation between you and Ms. Pont at a mutually agreed, and it's free. Usually it's 45 minutes for college counseling, and we'll please bring your student. So we need your student, not just for the parent. It's really for your student to meet with Ms. Pont, and both of them like each other, and Ms. Pont get to know your student, and then we can present a plan. So that's usually what we do, a free consultation through Zoom. Okay. Anything else? Okay, Ms. Pont, you want to kind of like share a couple sentences, like just to summarize the whole thing at the end?
Sure. It's funny that you should mention that one student who joined me in mid-December. She, interestingly enough, she just called me this morning because she has some interviews set up and that she's anxious and excited about. And so I gave her a little sort of we didn't have a lot of time because it was a little short notice, but I did a little practice interview with her in which we set up some bullet points for her to follow. So she practiced some stories that she was going to tell, and I brainstormed with her some responses to some of the more challenging questions they could potentially ask, and then left her with a few questions that she could ask them, because of course every interviewer is going to say, do you have any questions for me? So now she's all loaded for bear with her interviews with a couple of schools that are going to happen on Monday. So even though she came to me December 15th, we're still pushing her forward.
Yeah, that's very good. So okay. Yeah, my son is in good hand, and so that's it. I told you this is sharing, that this is really the purpose is to recruit students that Ms. Pont can help you guys, and yeah, that's it. So it's Saturday night, Sunday morning in China. Thank you so much.